Howdy, everybody.
You had to be from Montana.
Hey, Malcolm. And welcome back to the Lo-Fi Crossfade, where we are digging deep into the many themes of Star Trek. And, well, that's pretty much all we're doing here. So let's find out what we're going to talk about today. This is always so exciting for me. I love Star Trek. I love talking about Star Trek. Let's see what we're going to talk about today. We've got... Really? Five? You're making me the bad one? I have to talk about the bad one? I don't want... God damn. Okay, where's my... Okay, let's talk about Star Trek V. Consultant. Everyone has been making fun of this movie since it came out. Its reputation is that of a cheap, embarrassing ego project where a 58-year-old man in a hairpiece and a girdle wants to trick you into thinking that he could free climb a 3,000-foot tall mountain with an elite difficulty rating. Yep. And it is that. That's not wrong, but I'm here to tell you that it's actually more than that. A lot more. So much so that out of Star Trek's current 13 theatrical releases, Star Trek V: The Final Frontier ranks in my personal favorite top 3. I hope to highlight the truly brave thematic ambition that often gets overshadowed by a production plagued with a low budget of $27 million. Woo! I originally expected this to be a 15-minute video, but my script kind of got out of control, and I have no idea what kind of monster I'm dealing with.
It's bold in terms of jerking people around, but I may have gone too far in a few places.
So you know what? Let's just get right into it! The movie opens on this harsh, brutal shot of the desert, and if you're making a sci-fi movie and you have no money, you have two choices. You can either go to the desert, or you can go to the forest. Most Star Wars fan films, for example, are in the forest because the desert is hot and uncomfortable. It's expensive and difficult to shoot in. It's really hard to get quality amateur footage in a bright, washed-out environment where the sun just reflects off the ground in every direction. And then there are the windstorms. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, and no, this is not the Dakar Rally. This is the set of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and we can actually learn a lot about how difficult it is to film in the desert from the special features that were put together for the DVD. Let's take a quick look. You know, the pod racers were all destroyed. They basically had to completely rebuild them all. Just utter devastation. And you got poor Rick McCallum here trying to keep things moving. R2-D2's kind of getting around. Yeah, look at that, 135 degrees. Yeah, no thanks. Just kill me at that point. Yeah, no. Jar Jar Binks is not worth that. Anyway, if you don't have a full production team, the forest is probably your best bet. You'll see lots of time travel stories end up in the forest because it looks the same all throughout human history, at least. I swear about 90% of that DC Legends of Tomorrow show is in the forest for this very reason. And you know what? I think that's great for time travel. It totally works. But once we leave the planet, there starts to be real logic problems with our forests. I mean, trees are probably not going to evolve exactly the same way in any other environment. There might be vegetation, even what we would consider to be plant life, but most of it should be pretty unrecognizable. I mean, like in Avatar, it looks genuinely alien. Redwoods. Yeah, those are redwoods, but you know what they really are? They're not very alien. That's just California. So, I mean, there really shouldn't be redwoods on the moon of Endor or anywhere else other than Earth. You just wouldn't expect to see that there. This immediately, this doesn't feel alien at all. But you know what they do have on other planets? Deserts! They absolutely have deserts on other planets. Look at this gorgeous 4K imagery of Mars here. Even our moon is just a big white desert with no atmosphere. On just about every level, I think it's probably harder and a lot more expensive to film in the desert, but if you can afford it, you can make a movie feel pretty alien. Even if it's set on Earth, a desert setting can go a long way in expanding your production value in terms of making your movie feel alien. In terms of Star Trek 5. What this means is that they went with the more challenging option. As far as cheap sci-fi settings between forest and desert, I think they made the right choice, and it wasn't the easier or cheaper one. A lot of this movie's setting doesn't look very comfortable, and I give Shatner and his crew a lot of credit. One of my main sources for this video is a book written by a plucky young author named Elizabeth Shatner. That's right, the daughter of our dear captain here. And the book is called Captain's Log, William Shatner's personal account of the making of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, as told by Elizabeth Shatner. Kind of a mouthful, but I actually like it quite a bit. It's not thick, but the relationship between Bill and Elizabeth really comes through here. You get a sense. She talks about how interesting it was for her to realize that her dad was a superhero to the rest of the world, because to her, he's just dad, and dads are kind of dorky, and I don't know, there's some really cute exchanges here. I really like this book a lot. There's a chapter in it called It's Location, Not Vacation. And they definitely did not go on vacation when they made this movie. I think that rings true. Part of why I find Star Trek Beyond so boring is that a lot of it is just sort of in this forest, and they've added some little CG things floating around, but it kind of looks like a Star Wars fan film. It also kind of looks almost exactly like that one episode of DS9 where Odo and Quark are stuck on this planet together, and it's supposed to be this harsh alien environment, but it just looks like a lovely afternoon hike that I'd take my dog on. This feels almost exactly like that in every way, except less interesting or fun. And every time I've ever watched this, I always think, oh wow, it's just like when Odo and Quark are stuck on that mountain together, and it makes me wish I was watching that instead. So the setting is really a win for Star Trek 5. It's an appropriate sci-fi setting for the budget they were working with, and they didn't just cheap out and go to the forest. Nimbus 3, the planet of galactic peace, is a sort of United Nations where the Federation and the Klingon and Romulan empires can send ambassadors to help maintain galactic peace. It has a real dusty Western feel, a real outpost in the far reaches of the Final Frontier. For whatever reason, official meetings happen in the back room of a shady bar where a Catwoman strips on your dinner table. It feels like a formality that nobody actually cares about, that these people are probably just there because some provision of some treaty said that they had to be here in this back shady room of the bar. It seems like the normal people who just live here on this planet are pretty poor and resources are scarce. That might be why they have this little United Nations gathering set up here. It's probably less of a target, you would think.
Come and get it! Come and get it! Bones, knock it off!
Now, Star Trek 5, it does go to the forest, and it does look very similar to our eyes, but it's supposed to, because this scene takes place on Earth. It's in Yosemite National Park.
Yosemites.
to literally ground our characters to Earth, and it's just nice to occasionally see that these aren't just spacemen. Earth is still home, and we rarely get to see that in deep space adventures. For that reason, I really like these camping scenes a lot. And then to just kind of finish up talking about the setting, we also have the ship that we're all familiar with, except for these terrible rear projections that I think Mike Okuda is a design genius who has sort of helped give each Star Trek race its individual character, and he has really helped design the look of their user interfaces. He invented LCARS, the Cardassian language. I mean, he's not a linguist, he doesn't invent languages, but he can sort of draw symbols that might look like letters. He will connect to specific races as you move through Star Trek, and this is really his first time working on Star Trek. Here was Star Trek The Final Frontier, and he remained an important part of the series all the way through Enterprise. Just Star Trek would not be what it is without Mike Okuda. He is a design genius. He is not, however, a film genius, and for whatever reason, he convinced William Shatner to use these rear projections for the view screen in this movie, and they look terrible. I don't know why he did that. And that pretty much covers our setting for this movie, so let's go ahead and move on to the next segment, which is the plot. It's a pretty simple story. A super charismatic terrorist leader kidnaps the dignitaries on Nimbus 3 to lure the Enterprise there so that he can hijack the ship in an attempt to fulfill a religious quest that backfires in the end. And, well, that's basically it. It's a pretty bare-bones sci-fi plot that gives you a lot of time and room to focus on character development and themes, and this movie, it does that. Now, this movie is filled with fascinating ideas. I think most people end up being distracted by how little plot is actually here, but it's trying to use its time to say a lot. Okay, themes. As far as storytelling goes, themes are kind of what most interest me, so let's get right into it here. Star Trek is about coping with guilt. Our main antagonist, Sybok, played brilliantly by Lawrence Luckinbill, who is still alive, by the way, so if you happen to bump into him, please tell him that he did a good job in this movie. Sybok has developed the ability through essentially Vulcan mysticism to erase painful memories, or at least to free you from the ongoing burden and weight those memories continue to hold on to you with.
Never end a sentence with a preposition.
And he has developed a following along the way. Through this, we get to explore our characters' deepest shames by going into their minds. We see Bones coping with having to choose to end his father's life support just weeks before the cure to the cause of his death was discovered. The way it's shot, the memory doesn't feel like a perfect representation of the events as they happen, but it's an effective representation of the impact that the feeling of that memory still has on the man. It's well shot, it's well acted, and the concept works perfectly. Apparently, DeForest Kelley had some trepidation about this scene, and man, he just nailed it. I'm really glad that Shatner convinced him to do this, because it's just one of the most beautiful scenes in the entirety of the franchise. Further exploring the theme of shame, it is revealed that Sybok is actually Spock's half-brother. We come to understand that Spock never spoke of his brother because he was ashamed of his choices and actions. It plays heavily on the theme of guilt and shame, and a lot of people complain that this was a retcon at the time, but I think it actually works really well. There is a sense of betrayal felt by his friends, like, why did you hide this from us? Adding to the themes of shame and guilt that this movie is exploring. There's another theme or message that seems really important to this movie, and that is simply that STDs are rampant in nursing homes. Did you know that your grandparents are more likely to get chlamydia than you? Another theme of this movie is the balance between nature and nurture. The obvious surface level example is how different Spock and Sybok ended up despite sharing half the same genes. Now, I'm an only child. I was raised an only child. I have different half-siblings I don't know at all, but from what I've learned is that they're really nothing like me at all, and that's just sort of an interesting real-world phenomenon to explore in a goofy sci-fi movie. And they do a pretty good job here. At this point, the movie's really working for me. Oh, now it's really working for me. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that was going to happen. On a deeper nature-nurture level, while the notion of being freed from the pain of our deepest of regrets is alluring, the ever-wise Captain Kirk acknowledges that we need our pain. We are the product of our experiences, and we've all been beaten into the shapes we've taken by some level of trauma. The way we choose to live with that becomes an important factor in shaping our character.
Now learn something about yourself.
No, I refuse. Jim, try to be open about this.
About what? That I've made the wrong choices in my life? That I turned left when I should have turned right? I know what my weaknesses are. I don't need Psylocke to take me on a tour of them.
If you just unbend it all.
And be brainwashed by this con man?
I was wrong. This con man took away my pain.
Damn it, Bones, you're a doctor. You know that pain and guilt can't be taken away with the wave of a magic wand. They're the things we carry with us, the things that make us who we are. If we lose them, we lose ourselves. I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain.
So powerful. I watched this movie a lot when I was a kid, and this scene was like a huge impact on me. I try my best to view guilt as a positive thing. If I feel guilty about something, that is my brain telling me that I have grown as a person. I've learned since I made that mistake. Even if it is something that causes instant regret, you're not the same person you were before you made that choice. There can be real value in embracing shame, regret, and embarrassment, or as Captain Kirk calls it, his pain, as mile markers of personal growth. I regret doing that thing, therefore I am now a better person than the guy who thought that was a good choice. I watched this movie a lot when I was really young, and it taught me that when I was like 5 years old, and it's helped me navigate a lifetime of anxiety. Along with all of this, the movie explores the different ways that we cope and choose to move on in the face of loss. It's about how easy it can be to manipulate people if you appeal to the right emotions, even if they're brilliant scientists. Oh boy, and it's time for the elephant in the room here. Very specifically, this movie is taking on the American evangelical movement of the 1980s. The Satanic Panic movement of the 1980s was largely driven by three things: grifters, daytime talk shows, and the fact that the internet didn't exist in a way where you could easily verify facts. A bad man goes on TV and screams about how satanic cults are eating babies by the thousands. To the network, it doesn't matter if it's true or not as long as it gets ratings. The viewer assumes it must be true because if it's on TV, they'd have to verify it, right? The producers must have vetted this clown. As a viewer, there's absolutely no way to verify the credentials of the person you're watching speak, so you just have to trust Oprah's judgment. Which, ew. Like Dr. Phil.
Ashes unfolded across LA. There was a familiar face, maybe one that you wouldn't expect, who was embedded with ICE agents during Friday's raids. It was Dr. Phil and his camera crew.
Dr. Phil, why did you do this to us, Oprah? But that's basically the feedback loop. You have some asshole with no shame whatsoever who's just going to sell you a bunch of malarkey for money or for attention or for whatever reason, just, I guess, to get away with that hairdo. And they ruin a lot of lives in the process. There ended up being absolutely no legitimate convictions related to the Satanic Panic. There was no evidence that there were cults hurting children. These horror stories of satanic cults started to spread like wildfires, and before you know it, we had an entire culture convinced that they must protect their children from this existential threat that didn't actually exist. But the idea had already been given so much power that, well, it was basically out of control. Now, church had always been on TV in one form or another. You could always tune in and see some local service happening, and there were definitely a few figures who had gained national prominence, but boy, by the 1980s, church had become a production. Cable networks like Trinity Broadcasting Network were using the fear of the satanic panic, boogeyman threat to fill arenas, but also make enough money in the process to make God blush. The so-called mega churches popped up all over America. I think there's at least 2 or 3 in my hometown. They really offered pastors an arena residency to perform in every single week, multiple times every week, complete with enough lights, smoke, and hairspray to make you feel like you're at a Poison concert. This gives bored locals an opportunity to experience spectacle, the thrill of, well, essentially a massive rock show without, well, any good music. They have music, but come on, let's be honest. With money and attention comes power and influence, and soon the church had their filthy, disgusting, greasy fingers in the pockets of nearly every congressperson and senator, and definitely in the pocket of every single president we have had to this day. And what do they preach? Well, ultimately that you should love your neighbor, but be extremely picky about who gets to be your neighbor. The notorious Westboro Baptist Church people are, well, they're actually kind of right. You see, the goddamn Bible has some really horrible ideas about how we should treat specific groups of people, but those ideas were written by people living thousands of years ago who had no access to the wealth of information and knowledge we've gained as a species since their time, and we shouldn't be listening to them. The scientific method is only 400 years old. These ancient desert people who were clearly on psychedelic mushrooms had no idea how anything worked. It's just time to move on from this, and it has been for a long while. We need to take what good lessons are there and abandon the rest, like Thomas Jefferson did. I mean, not that he was a great bastion of morals or anything, but he rewrote the Bible to eliminate all of the oogie boogie goofy magic stuff and only maintain the positive morals. And if you go to the Library of Congress to this day and you ask them for a copy of the Jeffersonian Bible, they will give you one for free. So anyway, this is just kind of a lot to say that when Star Trek The Final Frontier was in production, America was in a religious pressure cooker. Now, Star Trek had floated the notion of a movie with a strong atheist message since Gene Roddenberry's earliest proposal for a script called The God Thing, which would kind of be reworked into Star Trek the Motion Picture, but the religious themes were largely abandoned, somewhat from the fear of alienating the same public who burned Beatles records when John Lennon pointed out that the Beatles had, and still have, a more universal appeal than any one religion. Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, Taoists, atheists, it doesn't matter. All of these groups like the Beatles, and people got mad at John for saying that.
The Beatles made a statement in all the newspapers that they're getting better than Jesus himself, and the Ku Klux Klan, being a religious order, is going to come out here the night that they appear at the Coliseum here, and we're going to demonstrate with different ways and tactics to stop this performance. The Klan is going to come out here because we're the only organization that will come out and make a stop to these accusations. This is nothing but blasphemy, and we're going to try to stop it any terror way we can, but it's going to stop. We're known as a terror organization. I think we have a terror organization. We have ways and means to stop this if this is going to be the case. Yes.
What ways and means?
Well, I don't want to say this, but there'll be a lot of surprises Monday night, I believe, when they get here.
When Star Trek went into production, things had sort of reached a fever pitch and were starting to boil over as far as the religious fervor in America. And it seemed like the right time for Star Trek to finally directly address what was happening. So before we get too much deeper into the specifics of the religious themes that Star Trek V is addressing, let's take a short break from that to talk about the production for a second. This film was directed and co-written by William Shatner, which is interesting. Leonard Nimoy, in order to get Leonard Nimoy to come back for Star Trek 3, they offered him the director's seat for that film. And he came back. He did a really good job. He did such a good job that he came back and directed Star Trek 4. But there was a clause in the contract for Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner that they were basically to be treated as equal stars. So if one was given something, the other one had to be given the same thing, or at least offered it. So they had to offer Shatner a role as director, and he took it. He did a little bit of directing on a show called T.J. Hooker, which he was the star of throughout the 70s, and this was just an evolution of that. On the DVD, the Blu-ray, the 4K, whatever, the really nice thing about Star Trek is that for each release, all of the extra features have pretty much carried over. There have been some minor things left out here and there, but for the most part, everything that was released on those wonderful DVDs are available here on the 4K still, and you can get them on the Blu-ray. But there's an audio commentary provided by Shatner and his daughter, Elizabeth, who, as I mentioned earlier, also wrote this book, Captain's Log, William Shatner's personal account of the making of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, is told by Elizabeth Shatner. There's not a ton of insight on the audio commentary. It comes across that Shatner's very proud of the movie. He talks a lot about having no time and about having some trepidation regarding being a first-time film director, but the production went smoothly. Fellow cast members have talked in their respective memoirs about how positive working with Shatner as a director was. It sounds like when he stepped into the director's chair, he understood the need to check his famous leading star ego at the door, and he really didn't butt heads with anyone. One interesting fact that was noted in the audio commentary is this Milton graffiti that William Shatner points out. It says, "Lost." So this part of Nimbus 3, this area where our United Nations in space is in a place called Paradise City. So we have Paradise written above the entryway there, and next to it, someone has written the word lost, as in Paradise Lost. Even the graffiti in classic Star Trek was clever literary references. God, I miss Star Trek so much. A very interesting coincidence was that about a decade later, a documentary focusing on 3 victims of satanic panic, Jesse Miskelly Jr., Damien Eccles, and Jason Baldwin, titled Paradise Lost, was released. The West Memphis 3, who were tried and convicted of murders they had nothing to do with. There was no evidence, but they liked Metallica, so they must have done it right. Yeah, that's how small town America still fucking works. Paradise Lost is a reference to an epic poem by John Milton that was first published in 1667. It retells the biblical story of the fall of man, Satan's rebellion, the temptation of Adam and Eve by Satan, and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden, which is kind of bullshit because they were tempted with knowledge. They were offered the gift of knowledge, and they were punished for accepting knowledge. Think about that for a second. I mean, I absolutely can appreciate Milton's poetry and the reflection it offers on the human condition. Beyond that, that's basically it for me. But I do respect Shatner referencing it. I think it's a good reference, and it's something that most people probably won't even notice, and it's really cool that it's there. So, this is the budget for Star Trek right here, and let's see how it did at the box office. Let's put the box office numbers down here. The movie was a bit of a flop. Now, it didn't faceplant as hard as George Harrison in the opening of A Hard Day's Night. Oh, Jesus Christ, George. He just biffed it. Look at him. He's like he's checking himself out to make sure he's not bleeding. He's checking his hand. Oh, he's fine. Jesus. Oh, but it still stumbled pretty hard. A lot of people complain that this movie looks cheap, and they will often point to this scene where the crew has to do a crash landing of the shuttlecraft into the hangar bay as one of the worst looking scenes of the movie. It totally works for me because of smart editing and really good acting that just makes me feel completely engaged with the excitement of the moment, and I barely notice the production shortcomings as a result. People also complain about, well, how obvious it is that this is not William Shatner, and how obvious it is that Shatner's just hanging on a little piece of set rock that they moved into the parking lot for his close-up shots. And here we have just One set hand there. A couple of dudes moving El Capitan. There it is. There's something pathetic about it. I honestly don't really notice that. His face is obscured in shadow well enough. I don't know if this guy's got his hair styled to look like Shatner's hair, but or if he's wearing a hairpiece. But I mean, I totally buy that could be Captain Kirk. Why not? And when we do get to the close-ups, the fake rocks look good enough to my eyes. I mean, that's not a matte painting. That's actual Yosemite National Park in the background. They shot this really intelligently. Shatner's hairpiece, which, as we learned in my previous video, may have been stolen from production. Okay, I have disembodied myself once again to provide a little voiceover, but it's totally worth it. This is one of my favorite things of all time. This is one of those things I look at whenever I'm feeling sad and I need to put a smile on my face. A cheap smile, but a smile nonetheless. What we are looking at is an internal memo from the production team of Star Trek, written from Bob Justman, who is one of the producers on the show, to Gene Roddenberry, the head showrunner and creator. It's dated February 5th, 1968, so this is between seasons 2 and 3 of the original series. And boy, this memo came out about 15 years ago. I can't imagine why, but the Roddenberry estate put this out. I don't know if William Shatner did something to upset them, or if this was just part of some big file dump, but regardless, this puts to rest a long-standing debate over whether or not William Shatner wore a hairpiece. The memo is titled Missing Hair Goods, and I will read the letter to you as written by Bob Justman. Gene, if you haven't already heard about it, we are missing some wigs and hairpieces. Bill Shatner borrowed all 4 of his hair pieces when we finished shooting. There are 2 new ones and 2 old ones. The new ones are worth approximately $200 a piece, and the 2 old ones approximately $100 a piece. Should Star Trek go again next season, this no doubt means that we will have to construct new hair pieces again for Bill, because he will have used both the old ones and the new ones to such an extent that they will not be photographable. This I guarantee, since it has happened to us before. Majel Barrett, Gene Roddenberry's wife, Majel Barrett's wig has disappeared. Nobody, including Majel, knows what happened to it. Nichelle Nichols' wig has disappeared. She borrowed it when she finished working and claims she returned it, but neither Freddie nor Pat Westmore know anything about it being returned. That takes us up to here on Missing Hair Goods. Regards, Bob. Shatner's hairpiece looks pretty good. What doesn't look good are these rock men who are going to come to life in the climax of the film. They were going to have 10 of these guys, according to Shatner's original outline, but the effect just didn't work, and they wisely chose to leave it out. I don't have much to say about the rock men. They're not in the movie, so it doesn't matter. It's just kind of interesting. They've spent a lot of money building these things, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. They made good choices. The other part of the production that really looks bad, as I've already mentioned, are these rear screen projections that Mike Okuda insisted be used for the view screen effect. It just really mind-boggling why we went in this direction. It's terrible. This kind of feels like a good time to get back into the main theme of this movie. Old people fucking. No, I'm just kidding. It's religion. I'm going to get back into religion again now. The next couple of minutes here, I'm going to be very frank and very open and very personal about some things. Might hurt some feelings. That's not the intent. I'm just trying to be as honest as I possibly can be about this. So, religion, I don't like it, and I don't particularly feel like being very nice about it. We shouldn't tiptoe around bad ideas that affect how people vote, which does affect everyone else. we should confront them head on solely for that reason. I mean, to you, live and let live types out there, who just say, hey, it's just getting them through the day, their faith may not affect you, but their vote does. And their faith affects their vote, and that's why this matters so much. Choosing to accept belief over critical thought leaves you vulnerable to having all aspects of your worldview manipulated. And so my personal beef is really more with the concept of belief in general. Belief over understanding. Choosing to accept information with no evidence. And that's really the root of the problem for me. Religion is just one of the means we've developed to systematically control the grander narrative in order to facilitate that manipulation into profit, other personal gains, or even just feeding an ego or egos. It's just another tool invented by humans to control other humans by making them feel less than, to the point where these people will actually say crazy things like, and boy, I have heard this one a lot my whole life, it doesn't matter what you believe in, as long as you believe in something. I don't care if you worship a rock, as long as you have a higher power you believe in. I've heard that so often growing up as an atheist. But why? Why does that make something more inherently moral? What's wrong with physics as a higher power that you don't even have to believe in? You can understand physics through measurement. Why does it have to be an oogie boogie consciousness? I have never understood why so many Christians think that someone worshiping a rock is better than worshiping nothing. To me, that really exposes that religion isn't at the core of the hang-up for these people. It's belief in general. Part of the problem there is that the American education system values memorization over teaching critical thought. You just don't want your future worker bees thinking too much about anything. If you teach them how to think, they will realize how bullshit it is that the system is stacked against them in such a way that they are going to be spending a greater portion of their time working just to survive, while 1% of the population controls basically all of the wealth. And that might be a little bit of a diversion from the direct theme of religion that we're talking about in Star Trek. It's a belief you've been sold to distract you from the real frustration. It's about belief, and while it's not religion, it's served in the same package. Star Trek has kind of always held understanding over belief. It has had a message of secular humanism. For more on that, check out my previous video where I have a pretty big segment on that. So that's just me. That's just my opinion. Historically, what does Star Trek think about religion? Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, was famously an atheist and secular humanist. He believed that one of the things humanity would have to overcome in order to become more enlightened and peaceful would be to accept religion as a superstition, abandon it, and move on in pursuit of understanding. That is a theme that you will see reappear throughout all of Star Trek. It's in the original series, it's in the movies, it's in Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, all the way until you get to modern Trek, where they abandon that for something else, but we'll get to that in a second. The second episode of the second season of the original series, Who Mourns for Adonius, is a weird ancient aliens plot. The crew ends up on a planet where they encounter Apollo. That's right, Apollo of Greek myth, the actual literal Apollo. And we learn that he's some sort of Q-like omnipotent alien. He can get big like Apache Chief. I like this, how they just raise the camera. It's an effective way to convey what's going on there, cheaply. But there he is, there's a big god man. He offers some pretty scary displays of power. As evidence, he demands that our crew worships him. Apparently, this alien visited Earth 5,000 years ago and was worshipped by our ancestors and intends to hold our crew captive so that they can worship him in a similar manner. Our crew, though, much more evolved humans, acknowledge that he is just an alien. They're not afraid. They do not immediately drop to their knees in worship. They approach the situation with scientific caution and curiosity. Even if our ancestors did worship this guy as a god, our understanding has advanced to a point where we actually know what's going on here. Maybe we don't even fully know what's going on. What they do know is that God is not the answer. It's a pretty effective takedown of belief structures until we get to this one line. Oh, wait, okay. Apparently, the studio forced Roddenberry to drop this one line into the script, and he's written about it extensively. He's talked about it extensively, where he has said that he hated this line. He did not want to add it in there, but if he wanted his show to go on TV, he had no choice but to compromise. This one line of dialogue has muddied these waters for the past 60 years. And let's take a look at this.
I try to be compassionate toward your kind.
You know nothing about our kind. You know only our remote ancestors who tremble before your tricks. Your tricks don't frighten us, neither do you. We've come a long way in 5,000 years.
But you're still of the same nature. I could sweep you out of existence with a wave of my hand and bring you back again. I can give life or death. What else does mankind demand of its gods?
Mankind has no need for gods. We find the one quite adequate.
We shall not debate, mortal.
To be fair, Gene Roddenberry hadn't really gone down the secular humanism rabbit hole at that point. That would really happen after Star Trek was canceled and sometime in the 70s before the motion picture. That's when he would really land in that. But he was always an atheist, and I can't imagine how much pain that must have caused him to have to put that line in there. But what we have in Roddenberry's secular humanist socialist utopia is the concept that monotheism exists on Earth still and is the norm, and that is just wrong, and it's never addressed again. This never comes up again. You will never see another reference like this ever again until modern Star Trek ruins things. As far as Star Trek goes, that was kind of in on touching religion for a while, though. After the show was canceled, Gene Roddenberry developed a script called The God Thing, which, as I mentioned earlier, was sort of developed into the motion picture with a lot of the religious themes left out. And then things just kind of progress normally. We get the first 3 movies, and then in Star Trek 4, we have some more information delivered to us, not really about religion, but this is where the socialist thing comes in, the concept that there's no money in the future, that anything that you need is just kind of provided to you, that we have a post-scarcity economy. People don't value things anymore. They value experiences. Your clout as you move through this world is like your social reputation.
Are we leaving?
Come on. We don't have much time.
Could we have that to go, please?
Sure. Who gets the bad news?
Don't tell me they don't use money in the 23rd century.
Well, we don't.
A couple of years after Star Trek, Star Trek The Next Generation would give us Q, who is a god figure our crew spits in the face of every time they meet him.
Q, what is going on?
I told you, you're dead. This is the afterlife. And I'm God.
You are not God.
Blasphemy. You're lucky I don't cast you out or smite you or something.
We would get episodes like Devil's Due, where it's basically Star Trek The Final Frontier, but instead of a god alien, it's a Satan alien that we bump into. And this was just kind of the norm. Religion wasn't really allowed. Our enlightened crew had to get over that in order to achieve what we are seeing them achieve in this vision of the future. Gene Roddenberry passed away in the middle of the production of Next Gen, and I think Rick Berman did a pretty good job. I don't know what Rick Berman's personal beliefs are. I don't know if Rick Berman is an atheist or not, but he did a very good job of carrying the torch of Roddenberry's vision and sort of being the keeper of that, of his dreams, of his hopes, and making sure that those were protected and that everything... The franchise did a very good job of adhering to canon, but the most important canon that it adhered to were the thematic messages were always the most important part of Star Trek's canon. But anyway, under Roddenberry's watch, Star Trek always used to advise an approach of scientific caution and a healthy level of skepticism when someone is telling you a belief. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The level of respect is dependent upon motive. Is someone sharing an idea that just gets them through the day based on a lack of understanding, or are they trying to convince you for whatever reason? And whether or not that person actually believes is actually kind of irrelevant. Any idea that is being sold to you based on belief rather than understanding is dangerous. Even if the belief itself is harmless, it reinforces the habit of accepting information based on how it makes you feel. And I think that is what we call a slippery slope. I got like a dolly shot in the desert for this episode. Hey, look at that! It's Vasquez! Anyway, I'm sorry. I get excited when I see Vasquez rock. So, the Prime Directive tells our crew to leave primitive races alone and to not offer scientific enlightenment, as belief structures are viewed as a natural and necessary part of a culture's evolution that shouldn't be interfered with. It isn't saying that religion is necessarily a good thing that needs to be left alone. It's saying that it's often a necessary growing pain that can't be skipped. That becomes an important theme from the TOS movies all the way through Enterprise. But we do have to kind of take a little diversion for a second to talk about Deep Space Nine. In Deep Space Nine, we are shown a race of aliens who have abilities beyond our understanding. They exist outside of linear time and live inside of this wormhole. They have some interest in a planet called Bajor. We don't fully understand why, but they've sent physical orbs as a sort of communication device with the people who live there. These people who live on the planet, the Bajorans, developed a deep religion based around the worship of these aliens, whom they refer to as the prophets. Now, these aliens are not very direct with their communication. These orbs kind of work in metaphor and in memory. The aliens don't understand linear time. They don't understand that tomorrow comes after today. For them, existence is all one thing that exists simultaneously. And we see our crew try to communicate that to these aliens. Our show begins in the aftermath of a brutal, decades-long occupation from the inhabitants of a neighboring planet. The Federation is there to sort of provide security as the Bajorans rebuild their society and culture. As we advance through the series, it might seem on the surface that the Federation officers are confirming every belief held by the Bajorans, but there's actually a lot more going on there. A lot of people, I think probably most religious Star Trek fans, misinterpret this show's message as religion is fully compatible with science. Federation scientists are not proving that the entire Vedic Assembly is right about everything. The Vedic Assembly, serving as the Bajoran version of the organized church, by the way, we are shown throughout the entire series as being heavily corrupted and a dangerous political organization, which mirrors the church in the real world. Not just the church, but the temple, the mosque, the whatever, all of it. What DS9 really shows us is how a belief structure can develop around a misunderstanding of natural phenomena. The religion becomes such a part of their culture that you have to treat it delicately, because if you tell them that they are wrong about any part of it, they will literally blow up your schools.
School!
Hey, didn't we just do that?
A new video appears to show a U.S. airstrike on an Iranian military base right next to the elementary school, where Iranian state media says more than 160 girls were killed.
DS9 is not explicitly saying that science is compatible with Christianity. In DS9, Cardassians are Nazis and Bajorans are Jews. which is interesting because it's about a race of people and a religion that are both kind of separate but also very connected. The religion is kind of as much a part of Jewish culture as it is for Bajorans, regardless of how much they believe in it or not. And it's because of what they went through. In the worst situation imaginable, faith can become a symbol of hope and perseverance. See Viktor E. Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning for more information on that. One of the quotes on religion that resonates most with me is attributed to being graffiti found in a concentration camp that said, "If there is a God, he will have to beg my forgiveness." That might be the most correct thing anyone has ever said, and I can actually imagine an episode of Deep Space Nine where a Bajoran who is angry with the prophets for allowing their planet's holocaust hijacks a shuttlecraft to take into the Celestial Temple, aka the wormhole where they live, to demand an explanation. Now that never happened, but I mean, that would be interesting and not too far off from what this show was doing. DS9 heavily involves religion, and it explores just about every angle you could imagine over 7 years. The good, the bad, the personal, the political, the imposed traditions, the culture of it, and, well, the dangers of indoctrinating children. All of it. It really gets into all of it. And it does it in a very sci-fi way. Where the show kind of fumbles and loses its footing, by the way, spoilers for the end of the big DS9 arc, if you're curious about watching that, you haven't done so yet. Benjamin Sisko is sort of portrayed as an ancient alien Jesus figure. Like, his mother was a secret ancient alien so that he could someday rise up to free the Jews. No, I mean the Bajorans. But that's kind of a weird analogy too, because the Bajorans were already freed when he got there. The end of DS9 with the paw wraiths and like the evil ghost possessing Dukat, this is so weird and so weak. The whole thing is just dumb. Deep Space Nine is a great show. The Dominion War build-up, the way it handles it is really elegant. It does a lot of things really well, but boy, it sort of fumbles the ending of this whole like Bajoran religion story arc thing. It gets really fucking weird. Praise the Sisko! So, I mean, ultimately what we're dealing with this show on Deep Space Nine, the Bajorans were trying to understand the evidence in front of them. So were the early humans, but they had very different evidence. The Bajorans have physical orbs that operate outside the realms of physics that nobody can understand, that somehow directly connects them to these ancient aliens. We don't have anything like that. I mean, we've been searching for grails and all sorts of bullshit forever that just doesn't exist. They have a wormhole just above their planet that you can go into and talk with these aliens. We don't have a portal where you can literally go hang out with Jesus. And I think most importantly, the Bajorans have this entire Vedic assembly and Kai that the wormhole aliens seem to not care anything about. And really, that's how much Star Trek thinks a real god would actually care about your stupid church. The prophets kind of only seem to care about the Sisko at this point. And he's an off-worlder. He's not even a Bajoran. He's their ancient alien Jesus man. I regret that such a large portion of my video has been taken up talking about Deep Space Nine. And I don't know, man. If someone says that they are a Niner, or that Deep Space Nine is their favorite Star Trek series, it's pretty safe to assume that they're some sort of Jesus freak or youth group leader, and they just think that DS9 validates the notion that science will someday prove the validity of the Jesus story. And I know that because I've bumped into these people, I've talked to these people. Not all Deep Space Nine. I love Deep Space Nine. It's one of my favorite Star Trek products. It's really good all the way through. I love it. But I swear, 90% of the people who you bump into out there in the world of Star Trek who say DS9 is their favorite show, they're like weirdo Christians who are like, oh, this proves that someday the science is going to prove that Jesus is real and we're all going to go to the wormhole prophet heaven with him. And it's so fucking stupid. I'm sorry, you people. It's just, come on. Come on. I mean, if you really get through the show, if you watch all of it and you're honest about it, the Bajorans are not enlightened religious scholars who are finally being proved right. They are a cargo cult who refuse to acknowledge the reality being presented to them. You cannot tell me that airplane isn't a god. I know what I saw. You cannot tell me that wormhole alien isn't a prophet. I know what I believe. It's Star Trek dealing with a primitive race in a respectful manner, and that respect gets misinterpreted as full acceptance of the ideas, and that's not what's happening here. And I think it's very important that that idea gets out there. And we'll definitely be coming back to Deep Space Nine in the future. There's just too much good stuff here to sink our teeth into. I want to talk about Section 31. I want to talk about all sorts of things. So look forward to that in the future if you're still with me. By the way, if you're still with me, thank you. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there are Klingons in this movie, but they're almost just kind of a B-plot. They're just kind of here to add a little bit of spice to the recipe, that spice being Spice Williams. Shatner spoke really highly about these actors in the audio commentary. He said that he kind of hired them based on their physique, but he was very impressed with not only their acting ability, but their dedication to Star Trek. And apparently they were dedicated enough that they actually spent months learning as much of the Klingon language as they could with the time that they had, and they took it very seriously. And they're speaking real, legitimate Klingon in this film, which was kind of created by Mark Okrand for Star Trek 3, which is why we have Star Trek 3 Klingons on the cover of the dictionary here. Regardless, they do a good job. Kabla! These guys are actually super memorable. They do such a good job, and they hold such a strong presence that it feels like they're a bigger part of the movie than they are. They come back in the end to kind of help our crew, which is cool. All right, kids, we only got about 8 more pages to get through, so let's shoot this fucker. Star Trek 5 was released in 1989 during the peak of religious zealots setting our country on fire, and this movie came out saying, maybe be careful when a charismatic group leader tells you that, they have the keys to heaven. I mean, really more so than being an attack on religion as a whole. This movie is really just saying that, that evangelical guy in a $3,000 suit screaming at you on TV from a football arena to send him money so that you don't go to hell? Well, there might be something going on there. In Star Trek 5. I'm not sorry. We watch a cult leader quickly gain power through manipulation to steal a ship to basically take him to God. And apparently everyone will just see whatever God is to them when they get there, which is, it's kind of an interesting idea, but well, when they get there, it's just another grifter who simply exists one notch up higher in the grift ladder and who ultimately becomes violent when told no. It actually feels like Scientology, which is interesting because Gene Roddenberry was friends with L. Ron Hubbard, and they talked about starting a religion and the benefits of that in the early days. Really interesting stuff going on there. But anyway, meeting God in this movie is like when they tell you about Xenu and you have to respond with, oh. So that's what this is all really about, huh? I think I have to be out. Even as a little kid, I felt that The Wizard of Oz was about a preacher, and the great and powerful floating head was the god lie he was trying to sell you. So I guess I'm just sort of wired to view things through this atheistic lens. I'm not even slightly exaggerating when I say that this movie, this goofy-ass shitty B movie that everybody shits on, helped shape me into a member of the skeptic community. What does God need with a starship? In the final act, the god creature demands use of the Enterprise to travel the galaxy. Kirk obviously questions, what does God need with a starship?
What does God need with a starship?
I've seen this sign in front of people's houses that says, this house is protected by the good Lord and a gun. Trespass and you'll meet both. They think they're being cute, but if you really believe that your house was being protected by God, What do you need the gun for? What, in case he slips up and lets a stray invader through? If you really, truly believe God is protecting you, why do you have that gun? Oh yes, God may have given someone the free will to choose to shoot you, but doesn't God's will trump that? Couldn't he stop that bullet if he wanted to? What does God need with a starship? And to me, that really reveals how little confidence they actually have in their belief. It is very telling that buried under layers of trained indoctrination, deep in the recesses of the reptilian part of their brain, some part of them actually seems to understand that no God is protecting them, and that's why they need that gun to feel safe. There is a reason people get driven to a hospital instead of a church when having a heart attack, and I mean, it's basically this. That is so logical to me that it feels like it's taken directly from a Vulcan text. If you're ever confused about where Star Trek would side on an argument, it sides with logic. Now, Spock tells us that logic is only the beginning of wisdom, not the end of it, and that is very important. But it still has to be the beginning of it. What does God need with a starship is also a pretty obvious statement on missionaries. If God really needed to reach some remote tribe of people, he, she, or it, whatever, could just do it. Why does God need to send someone on a boat to go tell these people about him every single time? What does God need with a starship? That's a damn good question, and Star Trek is one of the last movies that actually dares to ask it. We need to talk about the X-Men for a second. In X2, the second film in Fox's successful X-Men franchise, the movie features this character named William Stryker. He's a dark, shady military scientist working for the government. But that's not William Stryker in the comic books. He is described as a villain, primarily known as a fanatic televangelist and leader of the mutant-hating group, the Purifiers. This was introduced in God Loves, Man Kills, which, by the way, this new edition of God Loves, Man Kills was released on Christmas Eve. Not this last one, but the one before that. And the timing, they did that on purpose. He is a bigoted extremist who justifies his violent anti-mutant crusade through religious zealotry, often attempting to kill or eliminate mutants. God Loves, Man Kills was published in 1982, 7 years before Star Trek would confront the same theological antagonist. The X-Men were originally about the civil rights movement of the 1960s when developed, but it had sort of evolved to be focused more on the LGBTQ movement of the 1980s. And the church represented the greatest existential threat to the progress being made in that area. The world changed a lot in the 1990s. People got access to the entirety of humanity's collected knowledge at their fingertips. The AIDS crisis had started to find some resolution, not through prayer, but through advances in medical sciences, which have saved millions of lives. Satanic panic died down, but was largely replaced by Islamophobia post 9/11, which, we'll get to that. Megachurches converted from successful sideshow attractions into massive global billion-dollar conglomerates that operate like every other corporation. The frothing at the mouth fanaticism had kind of died down a bit, but the widespread cultural damage had already been done. By 2003, when it was time to make a sequel to 2000's successful X-Men, it was decided that the character of Stryker could not be depicted as a religious figure. Despite the fact that the X-Men comics have been highlighting the church as a destructive force since 1982, the movies have still never dared to go there. The church now has so much money and power, you can no longer depict them as a villain in your goofy popcorn action movie. But I guess on some level that was kind of always the case.
Ku Klux Klan being a religious order is going to come out here.
And as I mentioned earlier, our culture is kind of at a place now where you just kind of have to respect faith. Faith is held up as a virtue. You can't really criticize or question, or you're called a bully. The idea really seems to be that it's harmless. It's what helps people get through the day. Just let them have whatever they need. But again, these people vote, and those votes affect everyone else. And we need to be cognizant of that. And we need to be careful because it's really dangerous. As far as tracing our progress goes with X2 here, when I look at everything Star Trek was brave enough to confront, and then I look at what happened with the X-Men franchise just a decade later, it's not a very good sign, and it feels like we've gone backwards. You really can't say anything that might offend someone's faith, regardless of how bad or goofy the idea is or how harmful it is to culture. You're expected to respect it. By the way, none of the Star Trek movies have dared to even come close to themes like this since either. Every movie is just about a guy with a revenge plot and a doomsday weapon. We've become philosophically cowardly at the box office, and that watering down of themes to never offend anyone is part of why cinema is dying. Yes, Star Trek might be cheaply made, but name a JJ Trek movie or even a next-gen movie that goes this hard on a thematic idea confronting a real-world controversy. Star Trek is legitimately better than any of the next-gen movies because, despite its failures, it actually tries to be about something, and in many ways, it is successful at communicating its message, and it offers a fun, exciting ride along the way. Star Trek The Final Frontier is truly an underrated gem. Thank you so much for watching. Look, I don't have a big suicide plan. Unaliving plan. But you know what I've learned is that if you're not monetized, you can kind of get away with a lot of the things that you see people complaining about, the copyright stuff and the, not being able to say certain, you can kind of just, as long as you, if like the Federation, you are not monetized, you can kind of express yourself a little bit more freely. So it's kind of cool learning that, making my first video. Anyway, I really want to express my gratitude for hearing me out again here. I thought my last video would only end up getting 12 views, like legitimately I thought that, and it ended up getting like 170, which I guess technically is not great YouTube numbers, but it's actually great to me that, more than 150 people saw my goofy face on a thumbnail and thought, yeah, sure, maybe I'll give this a try. And I really didn't get any negative feedback. I didn't get any feedback, but I guess no news is good news. I did get a few likes, so I guess that's positive feedback. That last video was actually something that has really been on my mind for about a decade now, and it was really important for me to actually make that and get it out there, and I'm really proud of it. I expect this one to actually get fewer views, and that's totally fine. This is just kind of giving me a productive outlet for some thoughts. Regardless of if there's an audience for it or not, there's some sort of therapeutic value in making these and getting it all out. I've learned a lot about video essays. It's changed the way I watch them. I'm noticing quality issues similar to mine and certain word choices where I'm like, oh my God, I say that a bunch too. Like, how interesting. And it's just like I can totally empathize with some of the technical barriers and just what some other people have been working with. It's been really interesting, and I think I'm going to push forward, man. Why not? For the next video, I'm doing a deep dive into the fact that Star Trek Enterprise had an entire season that was a response to the September 11th terrorist attacks of 2001, which is kind of wild. Star Trek Enterprise is a really interesting show. I'm still not sure how I feel about it after all of these years. It's essentially kind of the final nail in the coffin of old franchise. The viewership kind of started to slip to a point where it was just canceled. I don't necessarily blame this show for that. It's just that Star Trek had been consecutively running on television in one form or another since 1987 all the way up through 2005. Oftentimes with 2 series overlapping each other at the same time. We're talking about, let's see here, 7 seasons of Next Gen, 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine, 7 seasons of Voyager, and then by the time you get to the 4th season of Enterprise, we sort of start to run out of ideas, at least from this creative team, and it kind of killed it. It sort of, it went away for a few years before J.J. Abrams and his cohorts would bring it back with a totally different vision. Enterprise, for those of you who don't know, it's a prequel series which takes place roughly 100 years before the original series, and it explores the beginnings of the Federation. It kind of takes place before that. In the final episode of the series, we basically see the ceremony that formalizes the Federation into existence. And a lot of the show is just kind of building up to that moment. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I like it, I think. We'll find out. It tries to distinguish its crew as being different from the more evolved Star Trek crews that we've come to know over the franchise history. This is the steps that we're taking to get to Roddenberry's socialist utopia as depicted in the Next Gen. These people are closer to us. There's a lot of flaws there. One of the weird choices that they make is that in order to show that these people are less evolved is they make Johnathan Archer, our captain and lead, actually brilliantly played by Scott Bakula, they make him a fucking idiot.
They're simply soldiers fighting a temporal Cold War.
Temporal? You've lost me.
What kind of post is this? It's great.
Chef told me I don't remember.
Can I talk to him?
Yes, but I doubt he'll make much sense. Have you ever heard of tropolysine?
No. Will this
Tropolysine.
I don't know about you, but I've learned really a lot since I got here.
I'm retarded?
Within minutes of the character's first introduction in the first episode of the first season, Johnathan Archer threatens violence against a young woman he just meets. It's really weird. It just kind of puts a bad taste in your mouth for the rest of the show. I don't know. I feel like that was not the best choice.
Admiral.
We may need to defer to their judgment.
We've been deferring to their judgment for 100 years.
John.
How much longer?
Until you've proven you're ready.
Ready to what?
To look beyond your provincial attitudes and your volatile nature.
Volatile? You have no idea how much I'm restraining myself from knocking you on your ass.
And that's a weird choice. But anyway, if you want to hang out with me and do a deep dive into Enterprise, that is what is coming up next. Go ahead and subscribe or whatever so that you can be a part of that conversation. Following that will be a quick, hopefully, I always think these things are going to be quick and they never are. This was supposed to be a 15-minute video. I'm so sorry for wasting your time. Following that will be a quick, that's fine, nobody's watching anymore anyway. Following that will be a quick, fun overview of the Fantastic Trekkies documentary, mostly the first one, a little bit of the second one, but then we'll dip back into some of the heavier thematic deep dives. There's a bunch of fun stuff coming up here, so I mean, I hope to see y'all back here in the next few weeks here on the Lo-Fi Crossfade, and as we always say, peace, logic, and metal. Kapla, bitches! See you next time!